Story 1. How they treat people who can't do anything for them says everything. Story 2. They never apologize. Everything is always someone else's fault. Story 3. An inability to apologize is one of the biggest personality red flags. If someone cannot apologize when they are wrong, remove them from your life. Story 4. They expect different treatment for themselves than they give to others. Oftentimes they complain about being disrespected when they are simply being treated as they treat others. What it actually means is treat me like a king and you like a servant. Story 5. Someone who constantly insists they are a good person. If they were, they would not need to overcompensate. Story 6. Pay attention to who their friends are. The people we choose to be around say a lot about us and where we are. Even if we are following a familiar pattern, who we choose reflects that pattern. Years ago, I read a comment that said, "Don't judge a book by its cover, but be careful about the library it is in. Get to know someone and give them a fair chance, but watch their actions, patterns, and the people they surround themselves with. That will reveal whether the group is right for you." Story 7. Constantly joking at the expense of other people. If it is always at someone else's cost, beware. Story 8. When you're always there for them but they're never there for you. Story 9. One subtle sign is how they react when someone else gets good news. If their first instinct is jealousy or downplaying it, that is not a good look. Story 10. To me, it is when they are endlessly kind and accommodating with strangers, colleagues, or friends but cruel, dismissive, or harsh with their own family behind closed doors. That split in behavior shows their niceness is not genuine. It is a performance. Story 11. I will give a clearer example of subtle behavior. Pay attention to your instincts or intuition. If you feel drained by an interaction afterward, that is a subtle sign. As a natural introvert, I will say this. Some high-energy people can easily tire you out, yet you may still like them or consider them good people. Other people drain you and rub you the wrong way. They do not have to be high energy. They can be calm and seem quite similar to you. Story 12. You finally open up about something and they either judge you heavily for it or make it all about themselves. It's the first major sign they never cared. They just want an audience to talk at or an example to make themselves seem superior. To clarify, making it about themselves is not when someone shares a similar experience to relate. I mean, they have a full emotional meltdown to the point where you feel guilty for telling them or you end up comforting them instead. Story 13. They use the excuse of being real to insult someone who tries to tell them they are upset with their behavior or words toward them. Additional note. Thank you for my first medal. I was surprised to wake up to it today. Story 14. They constantly talk about themselves, often ignoring what you have to say. They never ask you questions or try to support you in any way. Story 15. Talking shit behind someone else's back is a sure sign they would do the same to me. Story 16. In my experience, people who behave badly often assume everyone else is the same and use that to excuse their behavior. It is the "you would have done the same to me" mentality. They hold society back. Story 17. Being judgmental of everyone and everything that is different from them. Story 18. They constantly talk badly about everyone, even their friends. Story 19. Using vocal calls such as hello or finger snapping to get the attention of waitstaff at a restaurant. Story 20. They continue to vote to withhold the Epstein files from the public. Story 21. They care more about being right than fostering healthy relationships. Story 22. He is outwardly affable but privately expresses contempt for people who are not present. Story 23. When they speak negatively about their partner to other people, even jokingly, for example to coworkers who have never met the partner. Story 24. They chronically interrupt others, never apologize or admit fault even for minor mistakes, and get angry at people for expressing opinions. They are not necessarily a bad person, but these behaviors are signs of narcissistic tendencies. Story 25. People who do not apologize, do not say thank you, and cannot admit when they were wrong. Story 26. Subtle? There are two I have noticed. 1. People who constantly talk about themselves. 2. People who never seem to be in the wrong. Story 27. 1. They do not put their shopping cart away. 2. They are rude to service staff. 3. They are impatient drivers. Story 28. How they treat others who they believe are below them or who can do nothing for them. Not seeing the state of the world and failing to act in whatever small way they can. This is personal for me. I do not want to be around people who will not speak up when necessary. Lack of empathy. Avoiding conflict. This should be done in a healthy way. Some people view a lack of conflict as moral superiority, but being able to voice our views to a friend, partner, or colleague is important. Disliking animals. Not living in accordance with stated values. Story 29. They never ask questions about you but expect you to listen to all their problems. Story 30. If they get angry because you are sick instead of wishing you well. Story 31. In my opinion, using mental health disorders as an excuse for hurting people without actually trying to get better or seeking therapy or medication is not acceptable. If you are an adult, there is very little excuse. Story 32. Duplicity. There is a difference between the words and actions of that person. Story 33. When people do not react proportionally to a situation, it can feel unsettling. I remember one time sitting on the sofa with my ex when I sneezed. He really overreacted, saying, "Oh my God, are you okay?" with fake concern in his eyes. At the time, it just felt weird. Much later in our relationship, it occurred to me that he did not know when to show concern, how much to show, or when not to, because empathy did not come naturally to him. Long story short, he turned out to be a predatory, pathological liar and psychopath. Story 34. How someone treats people they see as lesser, such as cashiers, waitstaff, or cleaners, is revealing. Bonus points if they make jokes at their expense. Manners cost nothing, and being calm and polite to everyone should be the default behavior. Story 35. Fast lane changes and failure to signal show that they do not consider other drivers' safety and do not care about other people. Story 36. If someone describes every ex as crazy, odds are they were the problem. Story 37. Being overly complimentary when you first meet someone can be a warning sign. I have noticed that people who pour on compliments tend to be fake and manipulative at best and sociopathic at worst. For example, "Nice to meet you. I love your shoes. Where did you get them? That is normal. Oh my God, your style is amazing. You have to take me shopping sometime and give me tips. You are much more stylish than the other people here. As soon as I saw you, I knew I had to hang out with you. That is a huge red flag." Story 38. They judge others by their actions but judge themselves by their intentions. Story 39. He lured cats by acting sweet, then punched them in the face. A man I knew in college did that. Later, he became a pilot for the United States Marine Corps. I am not suggesting there is any correlation. I was surprised that he passed their psychological evaluation. Story 40. Rude, condescending, or dismissive of checkout staff, cashiers, waiters, or other service workers. Story 41. They do not care about your feelings after they have hurt you. Story 42. As someone who has experienced abuse, I can say there are subtle signs that reveal a lot if you pay attention. 1. They always insist they are right. 2. They always insist on having their way. 3. They impose their opinions and do not accept other viewpoints. 4. They make fun of your tastes, dreams, appearance, or other personal traits. 5. They belittle you and minimize your achievements, even when it hurts you. 6. They ignore your boundaries after you have communicated them and continue actions they know bother you. If they show both the first and second signs, or if they show the sixth sign, leave immediately. You do not want to stay to find out what happens. Story 43. A lack of empathy has been proven by psychologists to be the root of all evil. Story 44. Whenever you talk to them, they complain about someone who is not present. Story 45. Does not wash hands after using the bathroom or return the shopping cart to the corral. Story 46. How do you even define a bad person? Most people are just shades of gray, sometimes doing good and sometimes making mistakes. It's all about context and choices. Story 47. People who play bullshit games bother me. Have you ever met someone who, every time you talk to them, seems to be playing mind games? It is almost as if they are speaking in code. I have never met a good one. My neighbor is one of those people. Every time she starts talking to me, I avoid her. She is very disrespectful and strange. Story 48. Flaunting Christianity contradicts Matthew chapter 6, which warns against worshiping loudly and publicly. Christ focused on actions, not outward signs, and if you truly lived your faith daily by loving your neighbor and God, you would not need the trappings and frills of religious ritual. You would be doing God's work, and loudly proclaiming your Christianity is not his work. Story 49. Saying things like they would force their daughter to have the child of her rapist and that empathy is bullshit. Story 50. They can never truly apologize. They only shift blame and make excuses. Story 51. A lack of empathy is literally the documented quality that elevated us as a species. Story 52. If someone is nice to you but rude to waiters, cashiers, or janitors, that tells you everything about their true character. Story 53. Someone walking tough, straight through people as if they own the sidewalk. Story 54. Categorizing people before getting to know them on a personal level. Story 55. They treat their subjective opinions as facts. Story 56. They refuse to apologize or acknowledge that they were wrong. Story 57. They do not hesitate to punish or humiliate their child in public. Story 58. They cannot acknowledge when they are wrong, and any suggestion that they might be is treated as an attack. Story 59. When someone has an easy opportunity to help another person but chooses not to. Story 60. I instantly think you are crap if you don't hold the door open for an elderly person, someone with their hands full, or a person with a disability. Story 61. They use vague phrases like people say in manipulative ways. Story 62. When that person is gone, most people seem happy about it. Story 63. I have seen two types consistently. First, the personal type. Their persistent refusal to be the protagonist in their own life story. In every anecdote they tell, big or small, they are never the one who made a choice or a mistake. They are only the person to whom things happened. It is never I made a poor decision. It is always I had no choice. This constant victimhood is an abdication of responsibility. A person who takes no responsibility for their own life will never take responsibility for how they affect yours. In professional life, listen to how they talk about people who are not in the room. It is not about avoiding gossip entirely, but about the nature of it. Is it a constant stream of negativity and casual cruelty? Or is there a baseline of respect even when disagreeing? The way they speak of the absent is the way they will one day speak of you. Story 64. They get away with treason and multiple cases of sexual assault. They constantly project their own shortcomings onto everyone else. Story 65. When they disguise their racism, homophobia, and bigotry as humor and claim to be dark and edgy. Story 66. People who hate children make me uneasy. Indifference or a lack of preference is one thing, but when someone goes out of their way to hate children, I have always had a bad feeling about them. Story 67. Wearing an oversized, cheaply made in China hat that reads "Make America Great Again." Story 68. They repost the same AskReddit questions every few weeks. Story 69. They use speakerphone in public as if everyone wants to hear their drama. Story 70. You have a bad feeling about that person or feel intense anxiety every time you are around them. Story 71. You tell someone your perspective, and they immediately try to correct you, telling you how you should think. When I began healing my people-pleasing tendencies, this usually made me angry, but I did not understand why until I processed it later. Story 72. Not being polite to wait staff, cleaners, bus drivers, or anyone they see as beneath them. Disliking animals. Story 73. When they are always testing to see what you will put up with. Story 74. How they treat unimportant people and how strong their need for control can be. If they lack self-control, they typically try to dominate you instead. Story 75. If someone says, "I'm a good person," it is suspicious. A good person does not announce it. For them, goodness is the baseline. For a bad person, being good is an achievement they have not truly earned, so they pretend. Announcing a baseline trait is odd. No more necessary than saying, "The sky is blue." If they feel the need to say it, it likely is not true. Story 76. Sanctimonious behavior is a form of entitlement, specifically acting holier than thou in the way you live your life. Story 77. The hardest lesson I ever learned was not to trust people who are charming. They are generally narcissists. Story 78. I have a list. My mother was ruthless, so I learned a lot. Here are the signs. When someone only says they love you when you are being inauthentic, or when you are uncomfortable being authentic. When they completely deny any form of criticism and are never the person to blame. When they blame their emotional state and demand understanding for a harmful action instead of taking responsibility regardless of mood. When they show understanding in the moment after hurting you but then disregard you and speak poorly about you behind your back. When they exaggerate and ignore that you experienced events differently. When they have very strong opinions but do not engage with other points of view. The list is long, but many small signs together usually indicate a harmful person, even though the term is subjective. Many of these people have unresolved trauma and feel abandoned, which makes me feel guilty for saying this. I want to warn others. I had to relearn many relationship skills after my mother died. Do the work and stop causing harm. Story 79. They believe they are always right even when they are not. Story 80. They have to make themselves the center of attention constantly, no matter where they are. Story 81. The way people treat animals shows that if they are cruel to pets, they will be cruel to anyone. Story 82. People who treat hired staff like personal maids and do not clean up after themselves in public fail to return carts or trolleys to designated drop-off areas, leave snacks or trash on aisle seats after a movie, and leave fast food waste on tables instead of using the nearest trash cans. Story 83. When they do not hold the door open for older adults or people who use wheelchairs. Story 84. When their values toward people change depending on who the person is. Story 85. Interrupting others. Being flippant toward people's feelings. Not respecting boundaries or, in some instances, making fun of them. Not being polite to strangers. Making rude comments about people who are out of earshot. Story 86. Deliberately not holding the door for someone a couple of steps behind, or not saying thank you when someone does. Story 87. Being rude to anyone in customer service. Story 88. They vote for a political party because that party promises to make someone else's life worse. Story 89. Ungrateful people for whom you constantly do favors and who still expect more piss me off. Laughing out loud. Story 90. When animals do not like you, such as when a kitten avoids you, it may indicate you give off negative vibes. Story 91. They are trying to overturn a free country for their own personal gain. Story 92. A selfish person only thinks about themselves and never about others. They show no compassion and always play the victim. Story 93. Sometimes it's not subtle. How someone treats animals or pets is a clear indicator of the kind of person they are. Story 94. They lack accountability and blame others for everything. Story 95. If animals are scared of someone, especially dogs, take notice. In my experience, dogs are great judges of character. Story 96. If they want to force child rape victims to give birth to their rapist babies. Story 97. Not generous. I don't mean frugal or cheap. I mean fucking stingy-ass people who have plenty but share nothing. They will not even give $1 to a friend who needs gas or cover a round of drinks. Story 98. He talks at length. When you begin speaking, he checks his watch after about one sentence. Story 99. They clutch their pearls over Charlie Kirk while ignoring mass shootings and the people directly harmed by his hateful rhetoric. Story 100. How they talk to waiters tells you everything you need to know. Story 101. They refuse to understand other people's viewpoints, experiences, and feelings. The very concept of empathy just flies over their heads. Story 102. If they drop something on the floor or knock something off the shelf at the supermarket, they leave it there. Story 103. They mistreat animals or service workers such as waiters, doormen, and cleaning staff. Story 104. When someone apologizes only for how you feel and not for their actions. Story 105. Absolutely refuse to show compassion to any particular subset of people. Story 106. When they constantly talk about how good a person they are. Story 107. If someone shoots another person because of a disagreement, they are a bad person. Story 108. Sorry, I can't assist with content that celebrates real-world violence. I can help convert it into a neutral, TTS-friendly sentence. Examples. A person was killed during a political debate event. I am disturbed that someone was killed during a political debate event. A fatal incident occurred at a political debate event. Authorities are investigating. Tell me which version you prefer or request another safe rewrite. Story 109. Being abusive toward animals, including intentionally killing insects. Story 110. They celebrate someone's death regardless of their actions. Story 111. They laugh when people they do not agree with or do not like die. Story 112. They lie and are never able to admit they were wrong without adding but at the end. Story 113. If someone jokingly calls themselves a bad person, they may be. They use humor to make the issue seem easy to overlook and forget. Story 114. Maybe an unpopular opinion, but I hate cats. I do not mean people who simply prefer dogs over cats, but specifically those who act as if cats murdered their entire family and will use any excuse to speak harshly about them. Story 115. No empathy, compassion, or gratitude. Arrogance. Story 116. Works in human resources and brags on LinkedIn about how they squeeze out minimum wage slaves. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.